have an idea. Mr. President, why don't you give him a pardon? Give him a pardon. Come on. By the way, that was not in the speeches, you probably know. But I happen to like this gentleman right over here, and it just seems to make so much sense. You know, whether we like it or not, this has been one of the greatest wartime presidents. This has been one of the greatest wartime presidents. And cigars and champagne, who the hell cares about that?
The International Criminal Court has issued arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his former Defence Minister Yoav Gallant for alleged war crimes in Gaza. Middle East correspondent Matthew Doran joins us now. Matthew, what do we know so far?
Emma, good morning. These arrest warrants were issued by the ICC after months of deliberation following a request from the ICC prosecutor Karim Khan to consider whether or not this measure needed to be put in place. And what the ICC has found is that, yes, there are reasonable grounds to believe that Benjamin Netanyahu and his now former Defence Minister Yoav Gallant are responsible for war crimes and also crimes against humanity. Specifically, these war crimes are dealing with the use of starvation as a weapon of war, something that is prohibited under international conventions. And when it comes to crimes against humanity, it is saying that the two men are responsible for things such as murder, persecution and inhumane treatment of Palestinians in Gaza throughout the course of this war. We do need to stress this isn't a suggestion that Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant were on the ground committing such alleged offences. This is saying that as the leaders of the Israeli government and being in charge of the Israeli Defence Force, they are responsible as effectively the commanders there, the top civilians involved there. The ICC has also issued an arrest warrant for the head of Hamas's military command, that is Mohammed Deif. This is a man who Israel says they believe they have actually killed, but that has never been confirmed by Hamas. And he is being accused under these arrest warrants of war crimes and crimes against humanity as well, for the murder, the rape, the torture of Israeli hostages back on October 7 when this war in Gaza began. The reaction that we've heard from the Israeli political class is pretty much all the same. Certainly all of the major parties, even those who are critics of Benjamin Netanyahu, have come out in support of him, saying that the ICC has overstepped here, that it is excusing Hamas's actions on October 7, going so far as to say that it is anti-Semitic. And we've heard from the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu himself, in a very strongly worded video statement within the last half hour or so. He says that this is moral bankruptcy on behalf of the International Criminal Court, and he will not be swayed.
Citizens of Israel, no outrageous anti-Israeli decision will prevent us, and it will not prevent me, from continuing to defend our country in any way. We will not give in to pressure. Together we will stand, together we will fight, and with God's help, together we will win.
Matthew, what does this now mean for Australia?
This is a really interesting question, Emma, because Australia is one of the member countries of the International Criminal Court. There are more than 120 countries around the world which recognise its jurisdiction. Israel does not. That is why it can come out and make these sort of statements against the ICC's decision here. It is rejecting its jurisdiction. So too is the United States, also not a member to the ICC. And we've heard from the White House that it rejects these arrest warrants and is critical of them being pursued when war is still ongoing, saying it's a rush by prosecutors there. There will be a lot of questions being put to the Australian government as to how it will react. Will it enforce these arrest warrants if, for example, Benjamin Netanyahu or Yoav Gallant were to travel to Australia? We've heard from a number of other countries, including Canada, France, the Netherlands already this evening here in Jerusalem, saying that they will enforce these arrest warrants if Benjamin Netanyahu was to lob into their countries. But on the issue of Australia, this has been put to Anthony Albanese in the past when these were first being considered. He didn't want to speculate, saying that this was something he wanted the court to consider, and those questions will now be put to the government, of course. We have heard from Professor of International Law at the Australian National University in Canberra, Don Rothwell, and he has sort of explained what the equation now will be for the Australian government.
If Netanyahu or Gallant were to arrive in Australia, either in their current capacities or at some point in the future, even when Benjamin Netanyahu was no longer Prime Minister and the arrest warrants were still pending, Australia would be under a very clear obligation to give effect to those arrest warrants and to detain and arrest these individuals upon their arrival in Australia.
That is Don Rothwell from the ANU. So while that might be a hypothetical, it's not necessarily a case of Benjamin Netanyahu jumping on a plane and heading to Australia anytime soon. More broadly, this is a very significant measure because it will further affect how countries around the world deal with the Netanyahu government while this conflict is ongoing. Questions as to those diplomatic and political ties no doubt being asked throughout the day.
The outrageous decision by the ICC prosecutor, Karim Khan, to seek arrest warrants against the democratically elected leaders of Israel is a moral outrage of historic proportions. It will cast an everlasting mark of shame on the international court. Israel is waging a just war against Hamas, a genocidal terrorist organization that perpetrated the worst attack on the Jewish people since the Holocaust. Hamas massacred 1,200 Jews, raped Jewish women, burned Jewish babies, took hundreds hostage. Now, in the face of these horrors, Mr. Khan creates a twisted and false moral equivalence between the leaders of Israel and the henchmen of Hamas. This is like creating a moral equivalence after September 11th between President Bush and Osama bin Laden, or during World War II between FDR and Hitler. What a travesty of justice, what a disgrace. The prosecutor's absurd charges against me and Israel's defense minister are merely an attempt to deny Israel the basic right of self-defense. And I assure you of one thing, this attempt will utterly fail. 80 years ago, the Jewish people were totally defenseless against our enemies. Those days are over. Now the Jewish people have a state, and we have an army to defend our state. Notwithstanding the blood libels Mr. Khan has leveled, Israel will continue to wage this war in full compliance with international law. We will continue to take unprecedented measures to get innocent civilians out of harm's way and to ensure that humanitarian assistance reaches those in need in Gaza. Mr. Khan also sets a dangerous precedent that undermines every democracy's right to defend itself against terror organizations and aggressors. The ICC has no jurisdiction over Israel, and Mr. Khan's actions will not stop us from waging our just war against Hamas. But Mr. Khan's abuse of this authority will turn the ICC into nothing more than a farce.